Madam President, we're ready to start the meeting.
Great, thank you so much. So good afternoon, my name is Lisa Bender. I'm the chair of the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, and I'm going to call to order our first committee meeting. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by council members and city staff as authorized under Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Section 13D.021, due to the declared state of local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Reich.
Here.
Jordan.
Here.
Fletcher.
Here.
Cunningham.
Present.
Ellison.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Cano.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Palmisano.
Present.
Jenkins.
Here.
Chair Bender.
Here.
There are 12 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, we have two public hearings on today's agenda. The first pertains to the mayor's nomination of Mark Ruff to the appointed position of city coordinator, and the second is connected to our 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan and one-year action plan. So I'll ask the clerk to review the public hearing procedures for us before we take up the first hearing item.
Thank you, Madam President. The city has posted information with instructions about how members of the public may call in to participate in public hearings. That information is available from the city website at www.minneapolismn.gov/meetings. Residents may pre-register to speak during a notice public hearing and will be given a dial-in access code to use. Speakers who call in for a public hearing are added to a queue that is managed by our technical crew until the public hearing is opened. Once the public hearing is opened, the technical crew will move those callers into the live event. We will call each speaker by name in the order that they have registered. Each speaker will need to press *6 on their phones to unmute their microphone in order to be heard in the virtual meeting environment. We ask that after being recognized, each speaker provide their name and address for the record and then proceed to their comments. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. After the list of any pre-registered speakers is completed, we will check to see if there are any other speakers in queue who may have called in but were not registered prior to the hearing. Again, after being recognized, each speaker will need to press *6 on their phone to unmute their microphone. We ask each speaker to provide their name and address before making comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, I'll go ahead to the first item on our agenda, and I'll open the public hearing on the mayor's nomination of Mark Ruff to the appointed position of city coordinator. Are there any speakers who've registered to speak to this item?
There are no speakers registered for this hearing, and we do not have any speakers in queue to be recognized.
Thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing, and I will move to appoint Mark Ruff to the appointed charter position of city coordinator for a 2-year term beginning January 2nd, 2020. Is there a second?
Second.
That motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Council President?
Yes, Council Vice President.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to note that I'm supporting this nomination today. I have been very impressed with Mr. Ruff's service to the city as the finance director, and as well as the interim city coordinator, particularly in this time of unprecedented pandemic response that has been necessary for the city to embark upon. Mr. Ruff's steady leadership and knowledge of the city's various structures have been very important to us being able to have a quick and responsive action plan for the city. And so I am supporting this nomination today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to take this opportunity to also lend my support to Mark Ruff. I think he's been great so far. I'm really excited about him taking over the position.
Thank you. Would any other council members like to speak? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to express my gratitude really to all city staff who are stepping into leadership roles and sort of leaning into city leadership at this moment that's incredibly challenging and unpredictable. And I think Mark Ruff has been an extremely sort of calming and competent and effective presence in coordinating a lot of this. And so I am voting yes today, and I really appreciate the leadership and initiative that he is showing in the midst of this crisis.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't have a ton to add. Just want to voice my support for Mr. Ruff. I think it's been incredible to stay in contact. You know, we're all sort of in our homes, and we no longer have the opportunity for folks to pop in randomly into our office and give us updates or any of those kinds of things. And I would say that Mr. Ruff has done a great job of staying in contact with me and my staff. We've been able to talk about stuff even outside of just the immediate emergency that we're in, which I feel like has been incredibly helpful and reminds us that our work extends far outside of the very narrow scope that we're necessarily in. And so just wanted to extend my thank you and let my colleagues know that I will be supporting this nomination.
Thank you. Mayor Frey.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for having me here today. I am in support of the appointment for Mark Ruff to be our next city coordinator. I think he's shown the ability to act very calmly under pressure. He adds a sense of collectiveness and calmness to very stressful and difficult situations, and his ability to kind of bring the city together, especially through some of these crises, has been remarkable. And so I'm proud to bring his name forward. Of course, I ask for your support, and thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? I don't see anyone else. Again, to my colleagues, you can just put your name in the chat feature to ask to speak. I will go ahead and just echo, I think, what a lot of folks have said, but I feel it's important to pause and just acknowledge how much you have done, Mr. Ruff, for us over the years in the role of finance director, often, again, like as the mayor said, taking that calm, being that calm presence to really, share information, to ground us as policymakers in the relevant facts and information that we need to make decisions, and then to really step up during this extraordinary time in the interim role and really offer your support and guidance. I know you have been working around the clock with many, many demands on your time, and we are so appreciative of all you have done. So it's really an honor to support your nomination today, and we appreciate your willingness, again, to serve in that interim capacity and then step forward in this role as well. I also feel like I want to note too that I know as the mayor and others undertook the search for coordinator, I think Mr. Ruff had really an extraordinary attitude of being willing to serve our community, but also being willing to create space for the leadership of diverse folks in our community that we are working to empower. And it turned out that at this time, he was the best person for this role. But I really noted and appreciated that willingness to be part of an enterprise team and to serve in this collective way, and to really acknowledge our our ongoing goals to empower leadership in communities that are underrepresented. So I thought that was a really extraordinary demonstration of both your leadership and your collaborative approach to this job. So thank you for all of it. One last check-in to see if anyone else would like to speak. And I don't see any, so then I ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and that has been adopted. Mr. Ruff, if you'd like the opportunity to say anything, you are very welcome now.
Thank you, President Bender and Mayor Fry, for the nomination. I'm quite humbled and grateful by your support. It means a tremendous amount. I do want to echo Councilmember Fletcher's words about the fact that in this crisis, we have seen so many leaders throughout the enterprise step up, take initiative, and not those who are just the managers and the supervisors, but those who are on the front lines on a daily basis, making sure that our residents receive the highest quality services and are felt cared for. And that theme is important to me, and I'll do my best to carry that forward. I also want to say I'm greatly supported by other department heads, as well as all of you as elected officials, in just knowing that you have created this collective wisdom and also a supportive environment for us as staff that's also tremendously meaningful. And I'm grateful for that and for this opportunity to serve in, I would say, both a difficult time, but also a time of opportunity. So thank you again.
Thank you. With that, we have concluded that first item. Thank you again, Mr. Ruff. Our second item is a public hearing pertaining to the city's 5-year Housing and Urban Development Consolidated Plan for Housing and Community Development and our 1-year action plan. And we have Matthew Bauer here from the Intergovernmental Relations Division to provide a summary of the request.
Greetings, Madam President and council members. This hearing is for the city's 2024 Consolidated Plan and Action Plan. It's our city application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for our 2020 Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnerships Grant, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS. The 2024 5-year strategy details our intention for these funds over the next 5 years in the areas of housing and community development programming. A public hearing for this plan is required before submission of the plan to HUD. All comments received during the public hearing or written comments received during the 1-month public comment period that will be ending on April 11th will be included in the plan to be submitted to HUD. We will be submitting that plan to HUD next week from today on the 15th of April. And I stand for any questions after, if there are any raised after the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bauer. So with that, I will open the public hearing on this item. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers to register to speak on this item?
Madam President, there are no speakers registered for this hearing, and we do not have any speakers in queue to be recognized.
Thank you. So with that, I will close the public hearing, and I will
I couldn't hear you.
I think I was muted there at the end there. So I will close the public hearing and I will move to direct staff to summarize any comments for the 2020 to 2024 Consolidated Action Plan. Is there a second?
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. Were there any questions or comments from council members on this item? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and that item is adopted. The next order of business is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of items that have been reviewed and are considered to be matters of routine business. And so we'll be expediting them under a single motion and vote. But if any council members want to pull any items off, please do. I'll note that we have one item for discussion, and then I will also be pulling item 11 for an amendment that Council Member Fletcher will describe to us. So today's consent agenda includes the following items. Items 3 and 4 are legal settlements negotiated by the City Attorney's Office. Item 5 authorizes the city to intervene as a party to the CenterPoint Energy rate case before the Public Utilities Commission. Item 6 is approval of a contract of a total amount not to exceed $300,000 with Paradigm Consulting for domestic violence outreach triage services. Item 7 is passage of an ordinance that adds new sections to the Emergency Management Code by establishing succession plans for the city's elected policymakers in the event of an emergency. Item 8 sets an April 29th public hearing on the proposed charter amendment referred by the Charter Commission that seeks to reconcile discrepancies between state law and the city charter on the conduct of special municipal elections. Item 9 is passage of a resolution to approve a new form of contract for commissions on public works of art as approved by the Office of the City Attorney. Item 10 approves additional funding of up to $685,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contingency pool and authorizes a financing agreement with the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for the Exodus 2 project, which is a property at 1007 East 14th Avenue. Item 11 I will be pulling off, and that is the rollover appropriations. Items 12 through 20 are all contract amendments for a variety of goods and services. Items 15 through 20 are specifically related to work for the city's new public services building project, and all of those details are in the agenda. Item 21 is acceptance of a state grant for prevention and management of diabetes, heart disease, and stroke, and passage of a resolution to appropriate the grant funds to the health department. Item 22 is acceptance of the sole bid from the Riverview window in the amount of $1.2 million for lead hazard control at various properties. Items 23 through 29 are contract authorizations for a variety of goods and services, the details of which are provided in the agenda. Item 30 is acceptance of a grant for police bomb disposal services in the amount of $148,000 to provide equipment and training. Item 31 is layout approval and the authorization of negotiations with private property owners to acquire easements and additional right-of-way for the Downtown East Street reconstruction project. Item 32 is layout approval and authorization of negotiations with private property owners to acquire easements and additional right-of-way for the Plymouth Avenue North reconstruction project. Item 33 is a contract amendment with Nice Ride Minnesota to grant permission for the electric bike fleet to be locked to public bike racks. Item 34 authorizes the issuance of an RFP for professional management services of the municipal off-street parking system. Items 35 and 36 authorize the acceptance of low bids. First for the Hoyer Heights Street reconstruction project, and the second for Linden Yard soil hauling and disposal services. So those are the consent items. Do any of my colleagues wish to pull any items off of the consent agenda? Just pausing to make sure no one wants to get in queue. I don't see any, so I will move to adopt the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and the consent agenda is adopted. That brings us back to item 11. So I will turn it over to Councilmember Fletcher to describe this item and the recommendation that has come forward from finance staff.
Thank you, President Bender. Item 11 is an item that typically would have come through Ways and Means. It's approving the rollover of unspent 2019 appropriations into the 2020 budget for projects that weren't completed in 2019. As a little bit of background for my colleagues, I requested that we separate out items that were not time sensitive so that we could give a little more consideration to whether these rollovers still make sense in light of the revenue changes resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. And we attempted to separate out the items that had relevance to some of the pandemic response or items that were statutorily required to move forward or otherwise needed to be on today's agenda from items that could take a little bit more time to receive a little bit more scrutiny in that context. And we, in the process of separating them out, missed one item that it turns out is important to the mayor's gap financing plan. And so this amendment simply adds that item onto the list of things that we're moving today for rollover. It's $2 million of unspent appropriation from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And it's a part of the money that CPED plans to commit, at least in part, to some of the gap financing plan that we're proposing during the pandemic. So I will move this item with the amendment that you've been provided by email.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So Councilmember Fletcher has moved that amended item for number 11. And thank you again, Councilmember Fletcher, for that work to make sure that our financial decisions are prudent given the context of COVID-19 and the impacts we know we'll see on our own budgets. Is there any discussion on item 11? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and that is adopted. This brings us to our one discussion item, which is item number 37 on the agenda. This is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health totaling $406,526 to prevent and help manage the spread of COVID-19 from the time period of March 3rd through February 1st of next year. We do have Commissioner Musicant on the call, on the meeting, to give us an overview of this item, and then we'll have time to see if anyone has questions on the details of this grant. Commissioner Musicant, do you want to give a very brief description of this item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. These grant dollars came to us as a result of a response bill that was passed by the state that allocated $7.7 million to community health boards for the COVID-19 response work. And the state used the public health emergency preparedness formula to determine allocation amounts. So we did not apply for this, and we received it through our existing relationship and our funding that comes to local public health. And so, as you said, the period of time in which we have to spend this money is March 3rd, 2020 through February 1st, 2021. And we will need to report to the state how we are using the funds for the response June 30th. Two major areas of expenditure for the for the grant funding are support of staff. We have over half of our staff allocated or deployed to doing the response. And today we heard, I was on a call, I heard from the State Commissioner of Health that they believe that the peak infection will come to Minnesota in late June or early July. So we know that we will be in a response mode for a significant amount of time. So half of the funds are to pay for staff who would otherwise have had their time paid for by other sources, including grants that are not flexible. Another 100,000 will be available for community grants that we hope to put out as quickly as we can and as soon as you have helped us accept these dollars. We are also using a small portion for communication with the community and others, support for that, and then the remainder is for supplies and operational support. We don't yet know if we will be required to help do any supports for an alternative care setting, or perhaps setting up mobile testing in a month or two, or perhaps supporting a vaccine distribution when a vaccine is available. So we want to reserve some of the funding to support those activities. I will stand for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions from council members on this item? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Commissioner Musicant. I was just wondering, how soon can we begin to educate our community leaders that are really trying to be responsive on the ground by giving them physical distancing, messaging, posters, just really, how can we ramp up our efforts in communities of color that seem to be nationally being impacted, as well as locally by a variety of factors. And I know that, you know, we have been discussing putting together a community leadership team, but just wondering if there's work that we can be doing now prior to that leadership team being organized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice President Jenkins, thank you for that question. Yes, we too are very interested in not only creating opportunities to be able to be in dialogue and connect with community on an ongoing basis, but also to be responding right now. And so we have prepared materials. They are out and about. We have been on various radio programming focusing on on different communities. We are prepared to deploy some of our staff to augment some of the work, the educational work that's going on in the parks. We've supported them in developing their plan, and we will be working with community groups to amplify those messages about social distancing, have done the same with the schools. And we are using as many different relationships that we already have, both as a health department and through the city's neighborhood and community relations and race and equity staff, to work with partners in the community so that we can get the messages out in ways that are believable and that people can feel that they will act on.
Thank you, Commissioner Musicant. We know that sometimes it's hard to get the messaging into these communities, and so any extra efforts that you and your team can make to make that happen are greatly appreciated. And again, I am absolutely willing to help be a part of that, to try to help get the word out.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from council members? I will go ahead and move this item for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Cunningham,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Gano,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Jenkins,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and the grant acceptance is approved along with the resolution to appropriate the funds to the health department. With that, we have concluded all of the business before the committee today. Thank you everyone for all the work that went in to prepare for our first of these committee meetings. And without objection, we stand adjourned. We will see you all back on Friday. Thank you.